Hello, and welcome to this ARA webinar with staff from the JAG Group. The purpose of this webinar is to help you stay ahead of the curve, strengthen customer relationships, and ensure your business captures its share of the 45Z opportunity. My name is Hunter Carpenter, Senior Director of Public Policy for ARA, and I'll introduce our webinar speakers in just a bit. But first, I'll go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect. Webinars are an important part of the ARA professional development pathway and provide a great opportunity for ARA member companies to help educate their employees. Today's webinar will be recorded and added to the member-only ARA dashboard section of our website. As a reminder, you can log into the dashboard to access past webinar recordings at any time. If you do not have an ARA login, you can email info@aradc.org to set one up. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, but you can type them into the chat panel at any time. So with that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Brad Justice and JJ Johnson. Brad helps ag retailers operationalize the 45Z opportunity. Through JAG Group, he builds playbooks, trains teams, and negotiates pathways with refiners and crush plants to monetize verified low carbon intensity grain. With experience across agronomy, data systems, and compliance, Brad translates policy into clear commercial steps so retailers can move fast, de-risk execution, and deliver measurable premiums to their growers. JJ Johnson is a strategy analyst and advisor with JAG Group, dedicated to helping ag retailers, ethanol producers, and farmers capture value from the 45Z opportunity. He has worked across the biofuels and agriculture industries on carbon strategy, market development, and sustainable sourcing initiatives. JJ specializes in translating complex policy and carbon accounting into practical business opportunities for agribusinesses. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our speakers. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Hunter, and thank you to everybody here. We really appreciate the time and attention and the opportunity to speak to the ARA. Today, we're going to focus on the 45Z production tax credit. It's been a kind of hot and cold topic, but it's really headed into the final stretch right now. So we've got an agenda today. We're going to take you through where we are, kind of what are some of the details behind this. How can the retailer really engage in these sorts of programs and reinforce their relationships and their own bottom line? We'll show you some case studies and revenue examples, and then talk about some practical steps to capture value today. Like Hunter said, we'll have a Q&A at the end here. So happy to answer any questions or concerns we may not cover in the presentation today. So one term we do need to define up front is the term carbon intensity. And carbon intensity can be applied to many things. We can look at a cow and describe its carbon intensity, a kernel of corn, and a gallon of fuel. And in the case of the 45Z tax credit, carbon intensity is the measuring stick we're going to use to describe how much energy was used to produce a gallon of fuel. And one of the key terms we use in this is the idea of a life cycle. And so as we think of the life cycle of fuel, a biofuel in particular, we're thinking about everything from the energy it takes to manufacture fertilizer up here, all the way to the other end of that, which is the combustion of the fuel. And so prior to the 45Z, as you can see here, we were looking at the energy at the factory. We were looking at the energy in the transport. How did you transport the fuel, for example? But we were not including how we grew the corn and beans and sorghum that were going into these fuels. So previously, the farm did not participate in these programs. It was only focused on what we call sort of the engineering, transport, refining elements of the fuel downstream. What 45Z has done is it really unlocked farming practices as a lever and reducing that carbon intensity score. And like I said, the carbon intensity score is the measuring stick they're going to use to produce this 45Z credit on the other end. So they take these numbers, add them up, and that generates your 45Z credit potential. We are very excited that the grain can now be scored, because that's going to produce an opportunity for farmers to engage in these programs, to receive some of the benefit that the tax credits send back to the refiners. And they will also have the opportunity for retailers to sell in these sorts of products and services that allow them to reduce carbon intensity on the farm and ultimately in that fuel as it flows downstream. So the 45Z production tax credit replaces, some of you may remember the blender's tax credit. That was a tax credit that existed since the renewable fuel standard was put in place. The blender's tax credit was a $1 credit given to the blender for blending biofuels. We have sunset that, and you may remember some of the confusion at the beginning of the year around that, and we have replaced that with a production tax credit. The production tax credit goes to the refiner. So in the case of corn ethanol, that tax credit is going to that ethanol factory that produces the gallon of fuel. The benefit flows to that gallon of fuel. It's based on the gallon of fuel. In the case of something like we have crush, it's going to not flow to the crush facility. It's going to flow to the refinery. So that bean oil goes to, say, Phillips 66. They earn that credit for turning that bean oil into renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel or whatever their end product is. So the refiner is always earning that credit, but it's assumed that that's shared right back with its partners in the system. The tax credit was created in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in, I think, 2023 or 2024. Many of those programs, the rulemaking extended for many, many months, but under the one big beautiful bill, we had a lot of changes to the tax credits and how that was going to happen. The only tax credit that was extended from the Inflation Reduction Act was the 45Z production tax credit, and it was extended through the end of 2029. It allows biofuel producers to earn $1 per gallon on the fuels they produce. And at first, it's like I said, it brings in these low CI grain crops so we can generate even lower carbon intensity fuels that can be manufactured that way. So, next one, JJ. A little bit of the history here. I kind of jumped ahead on that, but the IRA was signed into law in 2022. We took comments. We had to go into a rulemaking period. And this rulemaking period was basically setting forth how do we use these different tools to calculate the carbon intensity? What are the rules around the different entities that might file from this? And that moved along to the USDA, Department of Energy, and the Treasury worked together to generate these rules. In January 2025, we received the first review of these rules and a calculator. We're not going to get too into the details here. There's a calculator called GREET. It's a giant Excel spreadsheet that you put a bunch of values into, and it spits out your score. The one for feedstocks, corn, beans, sorghum, that was released alongside of it. They call that the FDCIC, the Feedstock Carbon Intensity Calculator. These tools are generated by the Department of Energy and a laboratory in Chicago. That model came out in 2025. When we talk about values, when we talk about what we're doing today, we're going to talk about that particular model that was produced there in January. In July this year, we got the one big beautiful bill that updated some things, but kept the majority of the 45Z intact. Currently, we're awaiting the final rulemaking on this. We expect those final rules to be published by the end of the year, and then they will go into a comment period, and then they will go ahead and be issued, and people will be able to claim those tax credits. There's a lot of detail around timelines for claiming these tax credits, how people will do it, but the 45Zs for the engineering piece, so not the feedstock, not the on-farm piece, the engineering piece, those credits are already being issued. You might have seen some press releases. Green Plains has sold between 30 and 40 million of these 45Z tax credits. Folks like Gevo, who acquired the Red Trail facility in North Dakota, they've also been selling 45Z tax credits just based on the performance of their facility alone, not on the tax credit. So, although it's been a long journey, one of the things that's really important here now is to understand that we are bringing feedstocks into the world of biofuels, and how we grow those feedstocks, how we produce those feedstocks will have a direct impact, monetary value to the refiner who's producing fuel from those feedstocks.
Everyone. So yeah, we just covered what carbon intensity is at a high level, how it relates to 45Z. Now just get into some of the specifics around what crops and farming practices generate under 45Z. So there are currently 3 crops within the USDA's GREET tool: corn, soybeans, and sorghum. Corn is really where the action is and is the crop that we'll be mostly focusing on today. There's 2 main reasons for this. Both of these are driven by the fact that 45Z is credited per gallon of fuel. So the more gallons that can be produced from a single acre translates to more potential 45Z value. So, a bushel of corn or sorghum produces 3 gallons of ethanol per bushel, whereas, soybeans will yield 1.5 gallons of renewable diesel or biodiesel. So when you couple that with corn yields of 180 to 200 bushels per acre versus 50 to 60 bushels for soybeans, corn just significantly outperformed soybeans in terms of biofuel yield per acre. So, you're looking at 500 to 600 gallons of corn per acre versus 75 to 200 for soy-based renewable diesel, biodiesel. And then on top of that, there's just an order of magnitude more corn ethanol production in the US compared to US-based biodiesel and renewable diesel. So you're looking at 16 billion gallons of corn ethanol versus 1.6 billion. And now, I just want to quickly go through the farming practices that are eligible for 45Z. We'll cover these practices in a little more detail later on, but just want to introduce them here for now. So there are 4 main categories of practices. We'll start with nitrogen timing. This includes spring-only nitrogen application, in which no nitrogen can be applied in the fall. It all must go down in the spring. And the more advanced version of this is split in season, in which all nitrogen must be applied at planting and then after crop emergence. And within the enhanced efficiency fertilizer category, we currently have nitrification inhibitors. Hopefully this will expand to other products in the future. Within the tillage category, we have both no-till and reduced till as options. And then lastly, we have cover crops as well. And now I want to get into a case study to make this a little more concrete. So just going to walk through an example of how this all translates to value for an ethanol plant. So picked the former Green Plains, Tennessee facility since it's been in the news and was recently acquired by Poet. This is a 120 million gallon per year facility, and that equates to 41 million bushels per year of corn roughly. So for this baseline scenario, I just picked an ethanol CI score 50, since that's the threshold you can start generating credits. It should make the math easier, but in general, most ethanol facilities should be within a few CI principles. Where they're not using any low CI corn, they would not be able to generate any 45Z credits. And again, they need to get below 50 before credit generation begins. And the more that score is reduced, the more tax credits they can generate. So in the low CI corn scenario, if they're using corn that's grown using no-till and nitrification inhibitor, that could reduce the CI of the corn by 12 points, which then in turn reduces the CI of the ethanol by 12 points. So the ethanol CI in this scenario decreases from 50 down to 38. And essentially each CI point below 50 is worth about 2 cents per gallon. So if you multiply those 12 CI points, 2 cents per 4 cents per then when you multiply that by 120 million gallons, you end up with an annual tax credit revenue of $29 million. So that's a significant chunk of change. And then on the right here, you can see a map we put together that shows the 45Z value of existing practices within each county in the facility. There's over 400,000 no-till acres within a 50-mile radius of their facility. So sourcing those 230,000 acres of no-till is very feasible for them with help from trusted partners. Now, one important point to understand is that the CI reduction impact of each practice can vary widely from one county to the next. If you look at the map on the right here, this is still the area around Green Plains. But those different colors represent different ZI reductions for using nitrification inhibitor. So if Green Plains sources corn grown using nitrification inhibitor 1 county to the west of the facility, so if they go to Lake County, that corn would reduce the CI by 1.8 points. And if they source from Oban County, it's worth 2.3 points. And then if they go 2 counties east to Carroll County, that's worth 3.2 points. And that might not sound like a big difference, but going from 1.8 to 2.3, it's an almost 30% increase. Then when you go from 1.8 to 3.2, that's over 70% increase. And if in terms of value per acre, that translates from around $20 per acre up to over $30 per acre. And then if you apply that across their 41 million bushels that they source, or approximately 130,000 acres, that's the difference between $4 million in tax credit revenue versus almost 8 million. So, understanding what practices are worth in your area is really important. And yeah, gonna pass the mic back to Brad now. You're on mute, Brad.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about why retailers should care now. Look, one very important thought here is JJ and I spent some time back in building sustainability programs. We were for a while at a company called Indigo Ag that was trying to build these sorts of programs for better or for worse. And we left there with this thought going, these companies are just showing up as another layer in the space. They are bringing cost to agriculture. There are some ways that this could potentially be done better. And we really thought about the retailer, the ag input retailer, and thinking, here's a group of folks that already have the relationships. You're already speaking with those farmers. You already have good relationships with them. They trust you. You help them make decisions already. You're providing them with products and services. And what we really like about 45Z is that many of these practices are products and services the farmer could potentially get from their local retailer. So having a way that they can buy a thing or, purchase a thing versus having to go out on their own and do it. And the last one, and this is a point I'll come back to towards the end here, is you possess quite a bit of the data that would be needed in these programs for them to be able to claim those premiums, for the audit trails that would be needed to substantiate those claims. It already lives in your systems. You can already help the farmers bring that to life and participate in these programs. So really, we see 45Z as the fuel side of this program. There's probably food and feed. We'll touch on that. But really just the opportunity for ag retailers to lead, to help connect their farmers with value-added opportunities and opportunities that leverage that retailer's products and services, and allow you to become part of that ecosystem. And we'll go on the next slide here, and this was the confusing figure we built to describe this to ourselves. And this is not something I want people to digest, but rather just see that the ag retailer lives on the outside here, right? The program sponsor, the program partner here could be a Truterra, it could be a Bayer, it could be whoever that might be that's running some sort of program that's out there. It could be Mitch Hoare at Continuum Ag. But the retailer, if they are selling in products, they're selling in services, they're sending in data. Right now, we really saw them as excluded from that opportunity. And so this was the problem we saw. We saw this as this sort of confusion. There's too many arrows here. There's too much going in different directions. Could we simplify these relationships into something that makes more sense? And that looks like we thought of here, right? Put the ag retailer at the center of these programs, help drive the programs here. Now, in the past, that wasn't a super attractive opportunity because it was, oh, here's my complicated carbon program, and you'll get, 2 cents of nothing on you guys is doing all this legwork to put the data and do all this work. Very different program here in the 45Z program. And I want to make a couple points. One, it's a program in which all of the tools we need to calculate it are given out by the government. The person buying this farm data, essentially, although they never see the farm data, that's very important, would be the government. So it's a government-backed program. The value of carbon per acre, you might have heard in other programs, we're going to give you $20 or $40 or $50. The value in this program is $250 a ton for carbon, significantly higher values. And lastly, this touches a lot of acres. Biofuels is probably about 40% of corn production. We are talking a lot of acres. This program is projected by the Congressional Budget Office to be a $33 billion program over its lifespan. We want to, and success for us, everybody on this webinar, is making that a $66 billion program because we sent them all the data we could. We made sure we claimed all the tax credits we could. We made sure we get everything out of that program we could. That success here is really driving this because this is an uncapped tax credit program. And so again, it doesn't, from the government's perspective, we aren't sending out revenues, we're generating tax credits that get consumed on the other side. We should say these tax credits, and we'll go into more detail, they get brokered to cash. So typically the farmer and the participants are consuming cash out of these programs, not the tax credits. In this situation here, oh, sorry, JJ, I was going to just make a point on that. In this situation here, we have the grower at the center of it. Our model is to put the ag retailer as helping drive this program. So helping take that offer and say, hey, if you're buying products and services from me and you're delivering over there to Show Me Ethanol, we have a program for you. You enroll in our program. We've worked out an arrangement with a refiner. We'll help you get your data organized, get the attestations organized. And if you deliver it over there, we'll make sure that premium flows back to you, our customer. So it's your opportunity to look out for your customer, bringing that value added opportunity. Let's hop to the next one, JJ. Where is this value? Where is the 45Z value? Well, it's concentrated in the Corn Belt. Here we're showing you a national level view, state by state, of the value. And this is kind of an aggregated value of all those practices. So we've gone in and taken, acres of no-till, multiplied by the value, et cetera, et cetera. These are state level. Our tooling, as you can see over there on the right, allows us to go to the county level. So we can go into each county here, and that's how the tool is generated. It works on a county level baseline. So you need to know what county you're in to get the score coming out of it. That county level detail will show us the values of all the different practices in there. So concentrate in the Corn Belt, and JJ, in the next slide, we'll see, obviously, that is where the majority of the ethanol production is occurring. As well. So here's ethanol facilities with 100-mile radius around them. There are certainly other facilities spread out across the country, but the majority of this is going to flow around Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, et cetera. And that is where we see most of the incentives and the premiums coming from. Also, to give you a concept of what the value is, we just kind of want to give you a sense, like here is, in the Corn Belt, we went to looked at this as an absolute value. Cover crop, no-till, these are your most valuable things. Then it moves into nutrient management sort of applications. All of these, though, can be stacked to produce more value. So I can do cover crop with no-till, with inhibitor, for example. If I stack those three together, it's not 80 plus 80 plus 20. In general, they can actually generate larger numbers together because they produce more impact together. My favorite example is to give is Knox County, Illinois. In Knox County, Illinois, cover crop plus no-till plus inhibitor is worth $280 an acre with the current model that's been produced by the USDA. But these processes, let's go to the next one, JJ. In this one, they can vary between counties. Now, the way this model is generated is it uses a baseline. Here's what would happen. And then we did this thing, we measure against the baseline, and then we value that intervention. So you can see here that no-till is going to have higher variability across all of those counties. So is cover crop. The general value remains the same, but know that within these counties, and as JJ showed earlier in that excellent poet example, that different counties are going to have different values for different practices and different services. So it's important to understand that each county is going to be variable and to the amount of dollars that their practices are worth. So, kind of in this section here, this is our encouragement piece where we will say, look, wait, react, and risk losing ground. My first point would be here, chasing data requests. You have the data. They're going to call. They're going to call and ask for as applied maps. They're going to call and ask for receipts. So you'll be already getting requests for those materials. That'll be seen as a service. There are going to be people in your area that will start offering 45Z programs, whether that's the elevator, whether that's the refiner, or other retailers that have made those sorts of agreements. So, we really say lean into your partners, work with folks that can help you realize these programs, boost that customer retention. And at a time when we have very high input prices from inflation and very low commodity prices, this is another way to bring value to your customers, giving them market optionality and market premiums that are out there. The bottom line is you're going to be in a situation where you're providing data, not getting compensated for it. You're going to have customers that are looking around and seeing other opportunities. Our encouragement is really to start thinking about how you can engage in the 45Z programs, earn a portion of that, right? If you're going to be helping people get their data organized and get that into something, these systems are not super complex. This is not some dark art. It takes skills, it takes partners, but it does not need to take up all of your employees' time and energy to do this. There are system integrations, technology that allow this to be done much more efficiently and much more easily. And the outcome of that should be the opportunity not just to bring more value to that farmer, but the opportunity to sell more products and services. And the idea to think about maybe there's a new set of services. Maybe we should get some high boys and do some split in season applications because the ROI for that practice in the counties around me are quite high. And I can make that a really sticky relationship with my customer who delivers to show me ethanol over here. So, just our view here, our nudge is to really engage and develop a strategy around 45Z. And a lot of that is communication. I also want to say something here is in 45Z, this is an example of a program. Many of you might have seen programs for Europe, for states like California, Oregon, places in Canada like British Columbia, or the Canadian Clean Fuels programs. One of the things that happens in the world, especially we see RED 3 here, that's the European Union. Go look up the S&P Platts biofuels delivery standards. The standard for purity and quality is relatively short. The standard for data is paragraphs long. They will not unload that vessel in Port of Antwerp if it does not have the documentation to show them where that fuel is from. And in the case of some of these programs, which exact field that fuel is from. California has that requirement coming down. Canada is actually transitioning their clean fuels program to look a lot more like what we're talking about today, where farmers will get credit for the practices that they're using. But know that many of these economies are going to require more and more data on those bushels to bring them into their country, especially as we engage in some tit for tat tariff stuff. They might not put the tariff forward, but they might say, that's great, but we have a data requirement that is 10 miles long. Good luck to you in meeting that. So knowing that 45Z is going to allow you to start to get that sort of data. And again, this isn't just one market. There's more markets down there that run concurrent. I should say this. California stacks with this. So it's not I get California or 45Z. I'm going to get 45Z and the California low carbon fuel standard credit. And I'm still going to generate RINs on top of that. So there's an entire stack that's developed here in these systems. So again, if you're participating in 45Z and you've got the tooling for that, you also have the tooling to help these folks participate in some of these other programs as well.
So now I'm going to circle back to some of the practices that are most relevant to ag retail. So look at those corresponding documentation needs associated with them. So every practice that qualifies under 45Z comes with standards for how it's done and rules for what documentation needs to be available. And on the left here, we highlight some of those key practices and the requirements, and then show on the right how those translate to potential sales of products or services. So for nitrification inhibitors, they must all be applied, or they must be applied with all synthetic nitrogen applications. So if a grower is only applying inhibitor with a portion of their nitrogen, this could be a good motivator to expand inhibitor use to all of their nitrogen. For split in season, nitrogen needs to be applied at planting and no earlier, and at least 75% of the nitrogen must be applied after crop emergence. If you tissue sample and determine that you don't need all of the nitrogen that had originally been planned, it's possible to cut that back. So in addition to sales of custom in-season application services, there could also be an opportunity to increase scouting and agronomic support as well. Now for cover crops, you just need to keep the biomass and the residue on the field. You can't harvest, graze, or burn it. Hopefully in the future, they'll relax some of this to allow at least grazing. This translates to sales of cover crop seed, as well as potentially custom cover crop seeding. Then lastly, for no-till, strip tillage and fertilizer injection are permitted, just provided that the total stir score for all operations during that cropping period are 20 or less. Stir, just to define that, it's soil tillage intensity rating, and it's a scoring system developed by NRCS. So this practice could help drive sales of custom strip till or custom planting with a no-till drill. Risks aren't very common right now, but could potentially be an opportunity to expand. And we already talked about the record keeping and how farmers are going to be coming asking for help. And so yeah, beyond the process themselves, the documentation is really critical. At the very least, farmers will need to attest to their practices. And if they're selected for an audit, then they'll be asked to provide things like field boundaries, as applied maps, invoices and receipts, like for inhibitor purchase and cover crop seed, even nutrient budgets and soil tests where it's relevant. This is where many growers will lean on you. And you already have most of this data, so instead of record keeping as a burden, it could become an opportunity to help farmers find the data, help the value chain, and even refiners. I'll get into an example of that in the next section. We're on mute.
So let's talk a little bit about how 45Z value share can boost margins and think about how this breaks out. So showing showing this here on the 45Z share, one of the things we're talking about in these is it's important to understand there is a component that's going to flow to the farmer and the person that's helping bring that data in. Then there's a piece that goes to the refiner. And often one of the things we have to be cognizant of, the refiner has the sole exclusive relationship with the Treasury Department. Only they can earn 45Z production tax credits. Those tax credits come under a one transfer rule. So they can then transfer them to another party without any impediment. That party, to be clear, generally has to be a C Corp because of the way the tax credits are generated. If you're a nonprofit and you receive them, you can send the tax credits directly to the IRS, what they call direct pay, and you receive the full value from the IRS, but you must be a nonprofit entity. For the most part, refiners are going to broker these tax credits. They're either going to enter into a sort of tax credit loan. Think of Harvest Stone and Bank of America, where they're given money. They repay that money with tax credits at a discount back to Bank of America, or they take it to a broker like Nicholson, who will take those tax credits and convert them into cash for those folks. They must absorb these costs, the discount of brokerage. They must pay insurance during those transactions. They're paying their CPA, their audit firms. They have a number of technology fees that'll flow with this as well. And they have people implementing these programs. So even though we might say, hey, Knox County, Illinois is worth $280, that is true. but a significant portion of that is going to be consumed by the refiner and their ability to get this tax credit processed and produced. However, here's an example with cover crops where we can see that $72 flowing to the refiner and that $60 coming back to the retailers, right? That's your mix, your blend, how you use those dollars, how much flows to you as your piece, and how much flows to the farmer. That becomes a decision-making tool for you. It also gives you an opportunity to go in and say, hey, maybe we can run discounts, or maybe we can find a way to subsidize the service that you use so that you have less out of pocket for it. Not everything has to necessarily come in the form of a check as a premium. It might come as a discount in a program. Importantly here, we are tremendous advocates that you hand the farmer the check, that it comes from your organization, that you are the one that enabled this program, and they understand that you are looking out for them, and you are the person in this partnership that's delivering those dollars to them. Here you can see too some of the different margins, just looking at what costs might be at retail and then some of the value share that you might see on the upside. So even just on a product sales, service sales, capturing a portion of that value that's going downstream is valuable to the retailer and can generate a significant increase in the gross margin. Here's an example of a similar program. So let's assume in the area, the average 45Z value is around $100 an acre. And here, we're saying no-till plus inhibitor is a good example. If the refiner is able to capture, if the retailer is able to capture 15% share of that on 100,000 acres, I mean, that's a $1.5 million to the retailer for supporting this program and for operating this program. And that's on top of the opportunity to sell additional products and services that would qualify and enable your customers to enjoy the benefits of these programs. Great. And then we've really laid out these 4 pillars. How do you lead in 45Z from your positions, right? Train and educate. I hope part of what you got here today was a little bit of knowledge, a little bit more understanding. But how does 45Z work? What are the qualifying practices? What is the role that a retailer can play? Understand that opportunity. You have customers with crop in field with product and services on that crop that they're going to deliver in 2026 and potentially even this year, that is worth money. And the worst thing we can do is leave that data out in the field so that it never makes it all the way back to the government and nobody ever sees a dime of it, whether it's the refiner, the retailer, or the farmer. It would be a tragedy. We can leave billions of dollars in the field just by not understanding the value of the products and services you've sold them right now. Right now, you have a value that you can ascribe to your peer sold products and services. Build partnerships. This is going to be done with partnerships. You don't want to have to pick up all the work on your end. There's technology, there's all sorts of folks in this space. How do you organize yourself so you have the right vendors, the right partners, that you can build enduring relationships and you can capitalize on this program? Even though we know it runs through the end of 2029, I'm willing to bet a whole bunch of sandwiches at lunch that we see this thing renewed because we have a long history of supporting biofuels in our country. And then lastly, design and execute programs. You could stop at just understand the opportunity and it could be a marketing piece for you. Hey, we want you to know, Mr. Johnson, you've bought this much product from us and it's worth that much over at Show Me Ethanol. So we're looking out for you, value on the field, value beyond the field in the markets downstream. But also the ability to design and execute programs. So you can take that 15% share, so you can take that role that you have in helping collect and manage data and bring it to life, so that you can collaborate with your partners and begin to drive this to scale. Again, our opportunity here is not to see, fight head to head against the next guy. It's how do we drive as many bushels through this facility as possible to drive as large a program as possible to deliver the most value back to farmers as possible, to retailers, to refiners, to everybody in the rural economy that's really depending on something other than the basis price of grain right now. Wow, we hit that at 140 on the dot. I can't believe that. We did all right. That was
That's
not
great.
bad.
Thanks to Brad and JJ for a great presentation. I'll jump into some of the questions here in the chat that I've received on the host side. First question, who owns the data and at what level of data is collected?
Uh, who owns the data is one thing I will say, like I spend a lot of time in mental states. In 48 states, farmer data is considered a trade secret. They don't have many rights to ownership, which is a very strange world as you go down, pull that thread. But in this case, the data is generally regarded as being owned by the farmer. Um, when it goes into the system, they're going to file an attestation. It's a 2-page document. It says, here's my name, here's the entity, right? Because farmers are going to have multiple entities. And then it's going to have the scoring they got out of the calculator. That thing I said, the FDCIC, it's going to have the values that came out of that. So the farmer's going to test this is true. These values are true. And that documentation is going to flow with that bushel. There is other data that JJ was talking about, that record keeping data, receipts, and as applied mass and these things. That is considered audit data. So the way the regulation's written is if you receive 1,000 deliveries at a refinery, you're going to take the square root of that number, which I don't know what that is. And then you're going to audit that many people at random. A third party auditor will come in as assigned by the refiner. This is a cost that the refiner bears, not you. That auditor will come in, they will contact the farmer and they will say, hey, we're calling to ensure you claimed you did cover crops. Do you have the receipts for your cover crops? Do you have a picture of that stand? They're going to want to see some proof that that happened, and that would close that audit trail for them and move forward. So there is not an expectation. I should be very clear on this. This data does not go to the IRS. It does not go to the USDA. And the refiner, importantly, should never see the primary farm data. They should only be receiving the attestation. That is what they process. If they have an audit event, that should go to a third-party auditor who would then engage with the farmer. It is not a situation in which the ethanol refiner is going to be saying, hey, send me your farm data. So data remains property of the farmer. It's used, though, to produce these premiums.
And I think that answered our other data question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do growers need to make changes to qualify, or do current practices already count?
JJ, you want to handle that one?
So yeah, unlike in carbon credit programs where there's an additionality requirement where you need to do something new, under 45Z, existing practices qualify. You don't need to make any changes.
Great.
We love this program for that. Just no goofy rules. If you did it last year and you do it this year, good and great.
How does 45Z line up with existing conservation programs like EQIP and CSP?
Some of you might have noticed that the sorts of programs and things we're talking about sound like NRCS programs. If you go and look at the guidance, you'll actually see where they just copied and pasted the NRCS protocols into some of this. So a lot of this aligns heavily with EQIP and CSP. If you're familiar with 590 nutrient management, we're pulling on that. The tillage, as JJ indicated, with the STIR scores. A lot of this is connected back to NRCS practice standards. USDA basically said, let's use NRCS practice standards as how we should implement these practices today.
Next question, where should retailers start if they don't have a dedicated sustainability team?
I mean, my suggestion is one, we're obviously a resource. We're talking to you guys. This is a bit of our specialty out there. We help people find guidance. We think that you should, look for folks that are providing these sorts of services, because you don't want to have to build from scratch. There's a lot of folks out there that have technology solutions. So the real suggestion we give is look for partners, look for people who can help you on the journey. Certainly don't hesitate. If you have a good relationship with your local ethanol refiner, have the conversation with them. What are they thinking? Where are their thoughts at? What sort of programs are they putting together? Do they understand that you have a supply, you have relationships, you have grain on your side you can help leverage, but you really want to, be part of that program? You can't be a kind of a third party there doing the work, that you want to engage on that. So I do think it's important to have the conversations and see what's happening in your region.
It's a good question. What tools or resources are available to help retailers manage the data and reporting side of things?
JJ, do you want to speak to that, or?
Go for it, Brad.
So I mean, for the tools and resources here, there's a couple levels, right? At the highest level, there's the effort that's happening right now to integrate ERP systems. So if you're using something like AgVance, we're connecting that into data backbones so they can make requests. So as the ERP system in the refinery produces a contract with a customer, it can say, hey, we've got a contract with your customer. So instead of you having to go and send them records, you would just say, permissions granted, click, they would pull through the records they need for that audit trail, or their CPA or whoever's handling that data downstream. So there's automation at this sort of ERP level, software level. There are companies that are helping collect this data out there, folks like Verdova, Insight, a lot of your major farm management software sort of groups, Op Center, Bayer, Corteva, they're producing tooling to help people organize and get their data together as well. So we see a lot of different folks. In the case of a retailer, we work with a couple companies that help people organize their farm data if they don't have it already organized. There's a lot of solutions out there in the space. They're kind of a dime a dozen now. You can go get your farm management software. They make it in India very cheaply and very quickly. You can buy it pre white label. So a lot of solutions out there. You want to find the one that literally makes the least amount of work for you and your folks.
Can a grower that's signed up for a carbon program still take advantage of 45Z?
So yeah, that's a good question, and the answer is no. Yeah, if they can't both generate carbon credits from that field in the same year that they're also participating in 45Z. So that carbon reduction is already being claimed by that carbon credit program. So you can't then put that towards 45Z. But as Brad mentioned before, you can stack 45Z with a like California low carbon fuel standard program if that fuel is flowing into the California state program.
Next question, how does 45Z connect to the food and animal feed supply chains?
I love this question. Um, Food and feed is a place where we kind of all have been waiting for sustainability or whatever that might be to really kick off. These rails that you're building for 45Z, and we encourage 45Z, right? If I was here to tell you about a food and feed program, this would be a much softer presentation. We're talking about a giant government-backed program in this space. This is the one we believe people can really learn and understand and see. But those rails that we build over here are going to be the same rails we're going to take over here for food and feed. The difference in food and feed at this point is those projects tend to be smaller, they tend to be regional, and they tend to be sponsored by corporate interests. So, some of you might see McDonald's just launched a $200 million program focused around beef production for their burgers. They've brought a bunch of partners in for that. Part of that is going to be, how do they feed these animals? Well, one of the ways to get the carbon out of corn is obviously with these practices we've just listed here for the 45Z, fertilizer management, inhibitor use, no-till cover crops. So these sorts of practices would be what they're looking for there. So the opportunity is optionality for those markets. Hey, we've got 45Z over here, it pays like this, but McDonald's has showed up and they're doing a feed program. It looks like this. That's going to allow the retailer to be at the center of these programs. That's something I say to people, I'm blue in the face, because if we bring in an outside third party, they don't have any relationships. They don't sell any qualifying products and services, and they have no skin in the game other than to just charge fees along the way. That makes these programs very expensive for those food companies. To give you an idea, just to model poultry production for nuggets, they were looking to spend between $200,000 and $400,000 just to do the modeling of that. In our case, in the fuel side of this, they give you the model for free from the government. So it is a much simpler program, but understand that what we're doing here in fuel at scale is also what the future looks like in food and feed.
Can 45Z help boost commodity prices for corn and soy?
Yes, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about here is premiums back to those bushels, right? If you're doing these qualifying practices, if you're doing these things, this is going to be on top of basis. These premiums are going to be paid out on top of that. So we would see, we showed values there. Let's call it $100 an acre. Simple math person, so we're going to do 200 bushels, and so we're looking at 50 cents a bushel as the value that comes back. Now, how much of the farmer captures, I think we try to make that point. The refiner, different people will have different elements of the take in that. But yes, this is definitely a program which we encouraged politicians in DC only 3 weeks ago that they should hurry up and get it done because if it's a dime, if it's 20 cents, if it's $1, we need everything we can get flowing in to corn and beans yesterday.
We've only got time for one or two more questions, so feel free to put them in the chat. I just got one come through. Are there contract links, and can a farmer or co-op step away at any time?
No contract length. This is an annual thing. If you've done the practices, you show up to delivery, and literally then you can sign up. You can say, "Hey, well, let me tell you, I did do some no-till on these fields, or I did do this at these locations." And that's one of our fears is that people are delivering grain and they're like, "Oh, you know what? I guess I did use an inhibitor and all that. Well, I just left 12 bucks an acre sitting out there of value. What a shame. We could all split that up. We could have given half that to the farmer. We could have given some to you. We could give some to the refiner as well." So, yes, these programs, you can roll into them. They can be in them 1 year, out of them next year. There is no contract other than the attestation, right? So if you deliver it, you sign the attestation says I did what I said I did on this grain at the time of delivery, then yes, you'll be held accountable for that. But there's no like contract obligation to that, and it does have to go to a refiner in this program.
And just to piggyback on that, none of the practice standards are multi-year. It's all just from harvest of the previous crop to harvest of the feedstock crop.
Great. Well, seeing no more questions in the chat, that's about all the time we have left for today. We want to thank our speakers from the JAG group again. Brad and JJ, great job, great presentation. Additional thanks to those of you who participated today. And for our presenters, last call if you want to say any closing thoughts. All right. We see your info there on the screen. We appreciate that. Thank you again to those of you who joined us today, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.